We are now.
Well, actually, what they did the last time is compete.
I'm going to call the January 2024 meeting of the Sandusky City Planning Commission to order. First off, Happy New Year to everybody, and I would ask that the roll be called.
Jade Castile.
Here.
Jim Jackson.
Here.
Pete McGorry.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Steve Pajali.
Here.
Connor Whalen.
Here.
Mike Zuloff.
Here.
Moving on to the next item of business on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the November 22nd, 2023 meeting. I have received a copy. Unless somebody would indicate otherwise, I presume we all have had a chance to receive them and review them. Anybody care to make any comment, additions, corrections? Hearing none, would anybody care to make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes have been approved. The next matter on the agenda is election of officers of this commission for this year going forward. And I would like to make a motion to recommend, I guess is the, or nominate is the word I was struggling with, Mr. Pajali as the commission chairman and Mr. Miller as the vice chair. Anybody care to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Jackson, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, could we call the roll?
Mike Zuloff.
Aye.
Jade Castile.
Yes.
Jim Jackson.
Yes.
Connor Whalen.
Yes.
Pete McGorry.
Yes.
Steve Pajali.
Yes.
David Miller.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ex officio Chair.
Yeah, all right. Be careful with that gavel. I'll switch chairs
All
with you.
right, I warmed it up for you,
All
I
right.
guess. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, now that we've elected
yes,
officers.
Mr. Zuloff.
Now that we've elected officers, do we have a guest here that from, who do we have here tonight?
Dr. Richard Coons.
Yeah, I just wondered if we should recognize our additional city commissioner here.
Well, forgive me for not recognizing you, but Commissioner Kuntz is going to join us this evening to see what we do with the Planning Commission. Welcome, and you're welcome back any other time.
Hope you're not too appalled. Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, before we get started, I'd just like to mention that I'd like to, just a few housekeeping things. As we move forward, if somebody at the table wants to speak, please ask me for permission to speak, and I'll defer to you to speak. And also what I'd like to do is have staff give the report for each applicant. And then we'll have if the applicant's here and they want to speak, they can come up, and then we'll take questions so that maybe they'll answer some of the questions that we would have had along the way. So our next item on the agenda is an adjudication hearing, and I'll have to ask Mr. Hastings, we have to swear anybody in that wants to give testimony?
Yes, if someone's going to give testimony.
Is there anybody here who's going to give testimony on this application? Okay, raise your right hand. I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I do.
Okay.
So the
Mr. Oakes, you
first
wanna give
item.
the report?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The first item in question tonight is 149 East Water Street. It's a conditional use permit to allow a wall sign above the ground floor in the downtown business district. Actually, excuse me. why is that not right? Excuse me, I have the wrong one. So it's 149 East Water Street. The zoning to the north is downtown business, the east is downtown business, and the south is downtown business. To the west is also downtown business. The surrounding uses are both business and residential. The proposed use is business and a healthcare. The site at 149 East Water Street is currently transitioning into an office and a clinic for Family Health Services of Erie County. The applicant wishes to install an externally illuminated wall sign above the ground floor. Any wall signage above what is considered the ground floor in the zoning code requires a conditional use permit. The building will be split up into several uses. It'll be a medical center providing primary care, behavioral health, and a retail pharmacy, plus a rooftop space. The first floor will be primary care. The second floor will be for the behavioral health. The third floor is for the pharmacy and an office for administrative work. The hours of operation will be from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The applicant has received landmark approval for their exterior renovations on February 23rd of 2023, except for their exterior signage. That is going to be on the next Landmark Commission meeting. The zoning code does allow 36 square feet of signage on the front facade of this location. The proposed signage meet these standards. Staff has determined that if the brightness and the glare of the proposed signage are not objectionable to the surrounding properties, that the application meets all the standards for evaluating a conditional use permit in a business zoning district. There were no concerns or objections from other departments, and staff supports the approval of the proposed conditional use permit at 149 East Water Street with the following conditions. That's that all permits are obtained through the building department, engineering department, division of planning, and any other applicable agency prior to any construction of the sign. All light sources shall not be of excessive brightness or cause glare hazardous to pedestrians or auto drivers or objectionable to adjacent residential uses. That the fixture is dimmable, so if it is found to be a nuisance, it can be turned down, and that the light will be a warm tone 3000 K or lower white light, amber light, or filtered LED light source. Thank you.
Would the applicant or applicant's representative like to add anything and come to the podium and state your name and address?
Nathan Glass with Brady Signs. I feel that everything that was stated kind of covers all bases. I just wanted to make myself available in case you had any questions regarding the sign, how it's constructed, or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the staff or the applicant at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zuloff.
I wonder if the chairman could specifically comment or clarify whether everything is in compliance with the exception of the internal illumination.
So technically for tonight's meeting, through the chair, excuse me, to Mr. Zuloff, everything that's being reviewed tonight is for the location of the sign, which is above the ground floor. The external illumination is technically going to be a landmark commission review.
Okay, and with regard to the sign, the sizes,
Correct, yep. So the signage, all signage that is going to be part of this packet, it's not shown on the screen tonight because the other signage is separate from this conditional use permit, but all the signage that they are proposing is within the 36 square feet threshold of the maximum.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I had
Mr.
a
Jackson.
question, but I don't know if you're able to answer this question or not. I'm pretty familiar with that building, and I see that the applicant says that they're going to be utilizing all 3 floors. Are they planning on putting an elevator in that building?
You're correct. I cannot answer that, but we have others that may be able to.
My name is Michael Bowen. I work for Piagua Construction. We're the company that's been contracted to
Swear me.
renovate that. And I do swear that I will tell the truth, because I didn't say that originally. There is an elevator in there. It actually goes up to the 4th floor. We're putting on a 4th floor activity center for patients and staff on the 4th floor. So there'll be an elevator, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and they'll be programmable. So only people that can get up to the 4th floor cannot get on any of the patient care floors. So if we have an activity on the 4th floor that's outside of the daily routine, they only can get to the 4th floor. They cannot get on the patient care floor, any of the patient care. And we'll also have an ingress-egress stairwells in the back and the front as well too, per code.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McGorry?
a question for staff, actually 2 questions. So am I understanding that what's before the commission today is just to approve the dimensions and the placement of the sign?
Through the chair to Mr. McGorry. So tonight's review is strictly for the location. So the above the ground floor is the specific
Not
language.
approving dimensions? Or-
So dimensions is something I'll be reviewing for their signage permits.
Okay. And then my second question is, if the Landmark Commission would approve the external lighting, I'm presuming that there would be some lights on stalks that would shine back on the sign? Is that what external lighting means?
So through the chair to Mr. McGorry, and there's a couple ways that you can go about for an externally illuminated sign, one of which is, like you just said, having gooseneck is what it's called, lighting that shines down onto the sign. In this case, this will be halo lit, exterior lit lighting that will go onto the building, similar to what the City Hall signage is out in the front.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, did you have a question?
No, I think that kind of covered what I was concerned about.
I thought maybe I saw you raise your hand, but I guess not. Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll call for the vote.
Guess I've got to make a motion first.
Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to approve the application, subject to the comments and restrictions and limitations mentioned by staff.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote.
David Miller,
Yes.
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
Connor Whalen,
Yes.
Jade Castile,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
Steve Pajali.
Yes. Okay, motion passes.
The next item on tonight's agenda is for 1033 Cleveland Road West. This is for a similar main use permit to allow both a car dealership and also an automobile repair service that is beyond the limit of this zoning district. So the site is zoned, there's the one I was looking for. I don't know why I got mixed up. Excuse me. The site is zoned local business. The surrounding zoning to the north is local business. To the east is R140 single-family residential. To the south is GB general business. And to the west is LB local business. The surrounding uses of the site are both business and residential. The proposed use of the site is exotic car sales and repair. The site of 1033 Cleveland Road West is in the process of converting to a used car dealership and repair shop for exotic cars. The applicant wishes to obtain a similar main use permit tonight to allow the sales and services that are beyond what's called minor services in this zoning district that are allowed. Currently, the LB local business district does not allow car sales outright and also only allows servicing to a limited capacity, which includes lubrication and minor repairing services. Part of that is also it must be performed within a wholly enclosed building. The site sits on a highly trafficked and highly commercial corridor of Cleveland Road. The proposed use is not out of line and nor out of harmony with the surrounding uses of Cleveland Road and the surrounding properties or the previous use of this site. Staff has determined the proposed similar main use is appropriate, and the hours of operation of the proposal will be Monday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. All other days are by appointment only. The hours of appointment will be roughly from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on most days, according to the applicant. The neighbor to the north has specifically reached out to the applicant, who then reached out to staff, requesting that any installation of a privacy fence be not required as part of this process. He's expressed that he'd wish there not be a privacy fence in general by the applicant or through this process. So there was no concerns of this request by other staff or objections from other departments. Staff supports the approval of the similar main use at 1033 Cleveland Road with the following conditions. All permits obtained through the Building Department, Engineering Department, Division of Planning, and any other applicable agency prior to construction. The automotive repair services are limited to operations wholly within a closed building. The sale of motor vehicles may be permitted on an open lot, providing all requirements for front yards in a business district as set forth in the zoning code are met. And additionally, that was not in a packet, staff would like to add a fourth recommendation for condition that the business not leave vehicles that are in their possession or care parked on the street, nor allow customers to do so. Thank you.
One comment through the chair, if I may. I would clarify the final condition that the on-street parking condition be for overnight, so to not allow vehicles in the possession or care parked on the street overnight, nor permit customers to do so.
Okay. Is the applicant here? Would you like to come to the podium and add anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
I do have one question.
Could we get you to come to the podium and state your name and address?
Kyle Grothwell. My home address is 1226 Marlborough Street, Sandusky. I have one question about all repairs being done in the enclosed building. So the auto repair shop that was there before me had a great reputation with a lot of people, and they still come. And there's been times where mostly older people, they might need air in a tire or just their battery checked or something.
Yeah.
Is that something that I could do without having to pull in the shop to just put some air in their tire or check their battery, something like that? I mean, I understand overhauling an engine outside wouldn't be acceptable, but just simple things like that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zuloff.
in my vast experience in these matters, trivial violations are typically not a terrible problem unless someone complains. So, behave, you'll be all right. I don't think you're going to get the tire reinflation police arriving to cite you for filling tires outside of the building.
Understood. I'm a stickler for, if it's written, I want to make sure that I'm complying is what I'm saying. So I don't think the tire police are going to come get me, but I just want to make sure that I'm not going to be in violation if I do something as such.
I understand, and I guess, Mr. Grothwell, I'd like to get a second opinion from staff on your question.
Sure thing. Mr. Chairman, if I may. So I took that language straight from the current zoning district's requirements for minor services. Given the matter at hand, I would possibly give a recommendation to only require anything beyond what's considered a minor service to then be within an enclosed building as an option. So if whatever the board decides tonight is considered minor, I don't think you have to spell it out, but you could just call it minor. You could, and then not require it to be within an enclosed building. So that could include services like filling tires, changing batteries, et cetera. Now, if you feel that putting it explicitly of what's allowed, I'll leave that up to the board, but.
You're saying that we don't necessarily have to add that to the recommendation?
You could remove that as a recommendation or edit it to fit what the board feels is appropriate. These are all recommendations. These are not strict conditions that we are requiring.
Mr. Zuloff?
I wonder if the law director might have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, someone could make a motion to amend it to include minor repairs outside. What I understand staff to.
Is there a motion to?
Well, actually, can I have another?
Sure.
Can I ask a question
Mr.
here
Wayland,
first? Yes, sir.
Yes.
As it reads, it says minor repairing services. I would not consider inflating tires or checking a battery to be repairs. Right? Is there anything else that you can think of that would need to happen outside? I mean, changing a battery maybe would be repairs?
I'm sorry, it happens very seldom. The last one was a woman came and her car got sideswiped on the street and her bumper was dragging. And she pulled in, asked for help. I took the bumper off, put it in the back of her car, and she went her merry way. But just so everyone is aware, I'm not the least bit interested in cars coming off the street for repair. That's not what I do. I'm not open. I'm not a general repair shop for the public. But I'm not going to turn somebody away if it's something simple.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Your main concern is probably your neighbors. And if your neighbors start complaining about some of the things that you're doing, but as long as you're a good neighbor, I doubt if you're going to be getting any complaints from your neighbors.
Anyone else? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I'd like to quip on this issue first, but
Please do.
but it occurs to me that when I go to an auto parts store,
there's not a problem in having them change the windshield wipers or the battery or that sort of thing. And to me, that would be, in my own head, kind of a litmus test, that if it's more comfortable to have the amendment to include the suggested language, but I'm fine with it. To me, that's kind of the common sense litmus test.
Mr. Chairman.
Are you done, Mr. Miller?
No, I was ready to go with.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
My
Go ahead.
other comment or
Please
concern,
continue.
question for the applicant. Are you okay with the recommendation concerning the privacy fence? And where I'm going with that is that I can understand why a neighbor might not prefer a privacy fence, but other car repair places, I think we've had a number that are more concerned about a security enclosure for their expensive exotic cars parked in an area. So one person's privacy fence might be another person's security fence, and I was wondering where you stood on that.
That's a great question. The cars don't stay out overnight. It's pretty rare. I mean, there's a Durango that sits out all the time. The others are inside or parked somewhere else off-site because I don't want them sitting outside. The reason my neighbor to the north and I don't want the fence is because the lights that I installed, it puts a very nice glow on his property and mine, and we're concerned that putting up a fence would provide cover for someone trying to break into my building or on his side of the house.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Mr. Zuloff?
Well, I'll refrain from, my quip. And since we're on the fence, which I think is an important thing, there's a principle to consider here because we have to, properly deliberate all this stuff. We're obligated to, look at the long-term issues for adjoining neighbors, not just the present owner. And so I don't know how to deal with the issue of, okay, we say, okay, you don't need a fence, but, a future owner might say, well, gee, how come there's no fence? I'm trying to understand, first of all, is the fence I see in the aerial, does that belong to the neighbor?
No, that's my fence.
It's your fence, okay. And so what does the code say about the fence?
Typically,
If I could ask.
through the chair, typically in a case like this, the board would have the authority to require up to a minimum of 5.5 foot privacy fence in cases.
That's what I remember, is that we could require, but we don't have to.
You don't have to, that's
We're not
correct.
violating the code. So if we're silent on the fence, it's done, right?
Yep.
Thank you, that's what I thought.
Through the chair, I think it was more of a precautionary measure, considering that in past cases that the board may have required a fence.
Very, very good, I appreciate that, thank you.
Any other comments from the table? My comment is, I think you've done a nice job freshening up this property. I mean, it really looks good. You've cleaned it up. It's got nice curb appeal. And when I sat down with staff yesterday to talk a little bit about your application, my only concern was the storage of cars outside, because so many times if we allow a use like this, it turns into kind of a quasi junkyard. And that's the last thing I want. But you seem to be very conscientious, and what you plan to do, I don't think we'll have that issue. I guess my only question is, I see you're going to work on these high-end cars. I think I saw a Lamborghini and those Ferrari and those types of vehicles. Are there that many of those vehicles around?
I buy them at auction.
Oh, you buy them?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I purchase them at auction. And let me clarify something. I am 98% a used car dealer. That's what I am. I'm not a repair shop, so to speak. So I did some work for the post office, but most of my repairs and improvements are on the vehicles that I'm buying for resale. So I buy them at auction, I go through them, fix them up, and then I intend to sell them. And So I guess as far as the fear of it turning into, like a junkyard, like what you said, that will never happen. I mean, I think you can tell how I keep things
Right.
that it won't ever happen. And the cars that I have, I can't let sit outside.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines, sorry, wait
No,
for
that's
that.
all right.
It looks like you have 2 garage doors, so how many, just out of curiosity, like I said, along the same lines of it not turning into a junkyard with all these cars just parked and sitting, how many cars do you usually work on at a time? So you have enough room to park all of the vehicles that you're working on into the garages, or they'll be lined up like in the picture as well?
What picture?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know, if the top left?
That's the former, that's not.
Okay.
So to answer your question.
Oh, I see, okay, I see the difference in the paint.
Yes.
Well, I didn't know if that was like a picture of your,
No, that's
so
kind of
that
what it
is
looked
not
like.
going to be happening in your lot, I
No,
guess
you-
is what I'm asking.
See the picture to the right?
Yes, but you're not operating right now, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a few cars. So to answer your question, I'm a one-man band. I'm semi-retired. I do everything myself. So I've got one vehicle in the lift right now. The other bay is open. I have one car at my house. I have another car at my girlfriend's house. Right now, one of my Durangos is sitting outside. I've got some stuff to do to it before I get it ready for resale. So right now, the only car that's sitting there is, well, my plow. My plow there, and then the Durango's usually sitting in.
Yeah, I see previous.
There's the Durango.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll ask.
But something just came to mind I should probably mention, so
Okay.
you don't think I'm lying to you. My neighbor, retired police officer to the east, when he has big parties, he asks permission to park in my lot. So if you drive by and see a bunch of cars on a Saturday or Sunday, it's probably him having some sort of party.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Zula.
it would be my pleasure to make a motion to approve the application subject to the conditions, conclusions, recommendations, and so forth in the report. And I'm not sure we have the final copy, which may or may not include, but including, to clarify, the recommendation that we require that all cars be removed from the street overnight. So no overnight parking. To clarify, my motion is the wording that Mr. Oakes offered, which I can't repeat verbatim, but that's the intent.
Would you like me to repeat it, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sure.
So that would be number 2, which was that the automotive repair services are limited to operations wholly within an enclosed building.
And the additional one, that the business leave no vehicles in their possession or care parked on the street overnight, nor permit their customers to do so.
That's the motion. That's my motion.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any
Mr.
additional
Chairman,
debate?
discussion.
Mr. McGorry?
So I think the applicant has a legitimate concern, and I agree with what's been said by commission members that I don't think there's going to be a problem in replacing a windshield wiper outside, but I think I'm hearing that the applicant would like that spelled out more clearly in the motion, and I'm not sure that it has been. I think it was limited to all repairs taking place inside. And I think the gist of the discussion was so far that excluding perhaps minimum repairs which could take place outside.
Mr. Chairman, that was a deliberate exclusion because I was wondering if we got past that concern, it would be possible to amend the motion if we're still worried about it.
My comment is on the repairs. I think Mr. Whalen spelled out that that's already covered in the language. I think we might be overdoing it a bit if we included it. I think we ought to give Mr. Grathwell the opportunity to show that he'll follow through on what's the language that's currently in there.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You are comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
And it does say repairs, and
Exactly.
none of the things you mentioned, I don't think you could be cited as repairs.
Yeah, hope we move on.
All right, if the applicant, Mr. Chairman, through you.
Yes.
If the applicant is satisfied with the motion on the table, then that satisfies my concern.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote.
Steve Pajali,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
Jade Castile,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Connor Whalen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. All right.
Sky stuff finally.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to wish the applicant well going forward, and you've done a really nice job on that building. I work out of an office a little further east on Cleveland Road, so I drive by there a lot, and I'm just amazed how nice it looks, so.
I didn't even notice as well.
All right, I will, and maybe a little test drive on a Ferrari? Okay. Okay. All right, I will stop by sometime, thank you. All right.
All right. Our next item is a zoning code amendment for exterior light fixtures, and staff is going to give us a presentation on that.
Thank you, Chairman Pajali. We are bringing today a proposal to initiate a change in the zoning code to include fully shielded design lighting definition and to add fully shielded design language and related exterior lighting regulation to code sections 1107 definitions, 1145-17 landscape features and yard structures, 1149-10 site illumination, and 1183-06 streets. So the purpose of bringing this to you today is following the direction from the history of the Planning Commission conditions of site plan approval that have been commonly referred to as dark sky friendly lighting. And we've heard you ask us for this, and so we are bringing it to the table today. The purpose of bringing this sort of regulation into the zoning code is to preserve the view of the night sky by limiting light pollution as a public benefit in the interest of the public welfare, to protect maritime navigation safety as a port city, and to prevent glare or overbrightness that can create nuisance and safety concerns. The process that we went through first, and Mr. Oakes really led the charge on this, so thank you for your great work. We researched other cities to look at what types of regulation is out there for, what's commonly referred to as the dark sky lighting or exterior lighting regulation, nuisance lighting regulation. Many places have many pages of lighting in their zoning code specificity, and we went with a very simple approach. We wanted to bring something forward that's very simple and straightforward. Then we collaborated with the law department to ensure that everything was tidy and pertinent to the reason why we're bringing this forward, and then reviewed with city leadership before bringing it to you today. The components, as I mentioned, the first is fixture design, then color temperature, and facade and feature lighting, and I'll discuss each of those. First, when we're discussing fixture design, this image is from Dark Sky International Organization, and it really illustrates how much light pollution can affect the view of the night sky. So according to them, an unshielded light, which is all the way to the left, would be unacceptable, and the best condition you could ask for would be motion timers, so lighting isn't on unless it's needed. What we have brought in the draft ordinance is a requirement for fully shielded light fixtures, and that goes along with what Planning Commission has typically been requiring of site plan approval, for at least since I've been here over the last almost 3 years now. The next component of this is color temperature. So this is a good illustration of color temperature and how different light can look based on the color temperature. For example, in between 2 and 3,000, I think it's kelvins, I know it's K, 2 and 3,000 K of color temperature is candle flame and sunrise all the way to the left. Standard incandescent is about 2,400. Soft white compact fluorescent bulbs are at about 2,700. And then at 5,000 is horizon daylight. So if you like stare into the sun, that's what that lighting looks like. And tubular fluorescent lamps are at about 5,500. So just an example of lighting types. What we have drafted in the ordinance is the requirement of light temperature 3,000 K or lower, because that's really sufficiently bright for lighting, exterior lighting. It's pleasant to be around. It doesn't create glare that can be hazardous to traffic, and it's less likely to cause sleep disturbance because it's a warmer light. The third item is facade and feature lighting, and a shout out to Kevin Lee Visuals. I pulled this off of his Facebook page. This is the Cameo, and you can see that they have this beautiful facade lighting, but especially in the way this photograph was done, you can really see that it is creating no light pollution. So even though there is lighting pointed upwards on this building, the building itself is absorbing all of that light, and it's not polluting upwards into the night sky. And that, I'll show you how that makes sense in the ordinance with this, that this is illustrating. So here's the summary of what is actually proposed in your packet. So in the first is Chapter 1107 definitions. So we're defining what fully shielded design is, and that mimics the design that I showed on the first slide about fixture design. We would add that definition, and then we would apply that definition in different parts of the code. We would apply the fully shielded design and the color temperature application in the landscape features and yard structures. So that's for any exterior landscape and yard lighting. In the site plan review section.
I'm sorry, could you go back one?
So this is the landscape features and yard structures where it's specifically looking at floodlight searchlights.
I just caught the, it's interesting, the 3,000 K or lower. I wanted to make note of that. Thank you.
Is this going to cover residential and commercial, or both?
Yes, this would cover all exterior lighting.
All exterior, okay.
And it would be on new development, so new site plan reviews. The next is in the site plan review section, so site illumination. This would cover parking lots and just areas outside of a building. And it's the same thing, it's just implementing the fully shielded design and the light temperature into that section. And finally, in the same thing in the subdivision regulations. So that's the same language, just in all of those places where new development could occur. And the last item is back into the site plan, in the site illumination portion of the site plan review that specifically addresses facade and site feature lighting. So this would be where the Cameo picture comes into play. So those are all the places where it makes sense to add this new language. And with that, we would welcome any questions or discussions. If you're comfortable with how this has been brought forward, we would ask that you make a motion to recommend to bring it to City Commission for adoption.
Ms. Blair, that was a good presentation. I enjoyed the fact that just from reading the literature here, it didn't bring it home until I could see these graphics. So I'm glad you included all that. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, dark sky stuff has been a cause and concern long before the 3 years you've been here, and we've been adding this around, so I think it's great to take an affirmative step to an improvement. Somebody asked me today, I mentioned that this would be on the agenda, and they were like, well, what do you do about illuminating a flagpole? How do you position lights to illuminate Old Glory without it escaping?
That is a good question. In this instance, the site feature language asks that the landscape feature, the site feature, be absorbing the light and it not going into the light sky. So it seems possible that a targeted light could light a flag. I know it does move, so I think it would be at the discretion of the neighbors, if we're enforcing this, I mean, it would be, and maybe it's a nuanced thing like the minor repairs conversation we had in the last case, that we'll know it when we see it, and it's not,
I
an
could see,
overly an
through you,
issue.
Mr. Chairman, my concern is that the city not be technically in violation for illuminating a flag at the city building, at the Justice Center, or other places where a flag would typically be lit at night. So
Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Miller, but I'm sure the law director would agree with me that the city is never in violation. Yes, Ms. Castillo, did you have a
Through
comment?
you, Mr. Chairman, I have a neighbor that has a flagpole.
That's okay.
And
Let him go.
And
Jackson.
he's got a light on top of the flagpole that shines down on the light.
That's what I was
So-
going to suggest.
That would be preferable.
Yeah, and that's how, and I don't think he knows that he was breaking the law, or he just did it because he thought it would be better to have that light on top shining down on the flag.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Castillo?
Thank you. I just wanted to make the comment that I think this is great to change. Like Mr. Miller said, I feel like we've been adding that as an extra condition on a lot of our site plans and things like that that have come across. So also, I'm a big advocate for the dark sky lighting, thanks to Mr. Zuloff here, who's been giving me all the information about how lighting can affect the stars and all that. So I support this, and I agree with Mr. Jackson, too. I was thinking with regard to illuminating the flag, why couldn't we just put, that kind of downward lighting up a little higher and then maybe hoist the flag just under it so it's kind of illuminating downward? I mean, I feel like that might be a suggestion. Obviously, the flag's going to move, but be as close to lit as we can with being in compliance as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zuloff?
Well, I hope you'll forgive me because I'll try to keep it brief, but I have a lot to say about this because
Told you.
it goes way back. I think I was part of 3 attempts to do something about a lighting ordinance and bring us kicking and screaming into maybe it was the 20th century first, certainly the 21st century. Mr. Millen probably remembers a presentation I gave to Bayfront Quarter Committee. It was, my comments aren't always favorably received there, but this one was. I think I may have even used one of the images, and this was must have been, 10, 15 years ago. And it was a lot simpler then. It was complicated enough because there are issues of, at the time, there was high-pressure sodium, low-pressure sodium, issues of safety, issues of efficiency. It was complicated enough. So that one didn't get anywhere, and we actually made an attempt at an ordinance. It was very complicated. Because it was so complicated, it didn't move forward for a number of reasons. Part of that, I think, may have been a change in the city commission. Then we took another shot at it, but now LEDs came along. Now, LEDs made it outrageously complicated, right? Because now you have both, right? Now you're not only regulating the old technology, but the new technology. So then, now we've reached this point where LED is maturing. We understand it better. There's less and less of the old mercury vapor stuff, although it's still out there. Maybe with us too, I'm not sure. Less and less of the sodium vapor lamps, although the low pressure sodium is what's preferred by the astronomers, which we didn't mention, right? Because they can filter it out, and so they can still see stars and add to science. I'm not sure we're going to be able to deal with that, and we don't have a lot of observatories here in Northern Ohio anyway. So let's, having said all that, I want to say that I'm giddy that we're doing this, and I'm just so happy that we're getting to the point where it actually makes sense to do this. First thing comes to mind, safety, right? Everyone's concerned about safety. what we didn't mention here is that excessive light is actually less safe. It's glare, you can't see into the shadows. Excessively bright light provides cover for bad people, right? I personally experienced, I lived with a carport, and it had 100-watt light bulbs, bare light bulb in it, and I'd come home and I couldn't see anything. I took it out and put in one of those little 2.5-watt ping pong bulbs in there, and I could see just fine to walk. I could just see it just fine to, when I arrived, even with my headlights off, I could just see, and yet it didn't eliminate visibility. So it's intuitive. I want bright light. I want to scare off everybody. I want to be able to see. But the truth is that excessive light is almost worse than none at all. The safest level of light is unintuitively low, right? So let's get past that. And shining a bright light down your driveway is an intrusion to your neighbors, lighting up their house, which brings us to the concept of light trespass. Unwanted light from your property to someone else's property when they don't want it is not fair, not right, and we have to introduce the concept of light trespass. Our old ordinance, I made some notes here, our old ordinance did talk about shielding lighting from upper story windows. So maybe we can think about that a little bit or cover that. It might already be covered, I think. Without any mention, we're going to be way better off. But we do need, it would be nice to cover that aspect of light trespass, of even street lights, parking lots, whatever, lighting up somebody's house unnecessarily. Didn't know about the flagpole downlighting, if that was common. But again, if you uplight, very often the light for a flagpole is excessive, right? You don't need that much light to be able to see it or to comply with flag etiquette. Also, some lighting for flagpoles, I think the highest standard for flag etiquette is take it down at night, right? I suspect that sometimes the night lighting of an American flag is not driven so much by patriotism as laziness of not wanting to be bothered to take it down. But, I can't read people's minds and what's in their head. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Go ahead. Let Congress go.
Mr. Whalen, but first, Mr. Zuloff, thank you for that dissertation and/or history on lighting in Sandusky. Mr. Whalen.
All right, I got a couple questions. Try and be brief. So, first off, I know we've done these, like on every recommendation we've done for, I think, as long as I've been on this, which has got to be 5-ish years at this point. Can you go back to that slide where you had the better, best? What we've required in the past, has that always been the better?
The fully
Or as
shielded.
the bad?
It's the fully shielded fixtures.
While that's up here, are our current streetlights better or bad?
Unacceptable.
Oh, they're unacceptable.
Some of them are very bad.
I believe
Just
they
have a
are
tiny little
shielded
cap.
on the top, but they
Just-
can go out.
some of them have a tiny little
They can go
cap.
out horizontally,
The,
not just down.
I think the newer ones that are on Shoreline Drive and everything, I think they might be better because the lip doesn't stop. It does come down to direct the light in a cone shape. But some of the old ones are just
Yeah, I'm
open
thinking
on the
that it's
top. Yeah, like the old downtown ones are all open on the top.
So then that kind of leads me in then to my next question. What is the relevance of this ordinance on what is already existing?
It's applicable to new development. So it's not relevant to existing.
Okay, so this would not,
We don't have to go out
this
and
would
replace all
not
the
go back.
streetlights or.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, don't
that
go back
and
to any
I can
other.
think of a neighbor's light who goes
Neighbors,
in
yeah.
my daughter's room and she would call it trespassing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that guy is itching to get out there and replace his light off the back of his garage. So it does not apply to what's already existing.
Correct. I would add to, through the chair, that we have worked on update of our nuisance code to discuss light trespass and nuisance lighting that we intend to bring to city commission. That's administered outside of the zoning code. So we are thinking about that could apply to existing light. If there's existing light that's a problem for neighbors, to make sure that we have that articulated.
But
in the
that's not
nuisance.
what's here.
That's not what's here.
Not
This
what's
is
here.
about new projects.
Okay. Then my only other, and honestly, I'm a fan of this. I think that we should go with the fully shielded lights, and we've done it, in all of our past recommendations. I'm just a little bit worried about the language in B for places like the Cameo, the Firelands Building's the other one that pops into mind here. A lot of the times, this exterior lighting that's for show are things that we like, right? Like I can think some going on to a building that are up and not down, and my concern is just making the language, is this good enough language to allow people that are responsibly trying to light their buildings in a good way and not penalize future applicants, or kind of the worry is leave it completely up to, the individuals deciding. I would like some clarity, I guess, in the language there as far as when it is up, shining up because it's meant to shine up, how are we going to regulate that, right? I mean, the Cameo, like you said, that looks great. That's by my house. That's a great lighting, and future applicants, we want to make sure we can approve them. What I want to know is how do we write this clearly so that we can know what's good and acceptable and what's not, and it's not so loose to interpretation.
Understood. Thank you for that question. So this is exactly the conversation came up, and we were talking about the Fike building, and then I found the Cameo picture today about facade and feature lighting, and even thinking about folks that want to point a light at their house. That's very common, or point a light at their favorite tree. So that's why we wrote this part in, and we did review several other ordinances to take, to help with this language. So it says that the fixtures shall be shielded and directed onto the building facade. So you don't have an open floodlight, like you're directing your lighting onto the building facade, site feature, or the landscape, so it doesn't cause a glare or allow light to project into the night sky, and that fixtures are also not toward the street, the road, or other properties. So basically, it's using the minimum amount of light necessary to light the feature. For example, I think generally an architect could show us that in the example of the Cameo and the Fike building. Those lights are cone-shaped, they are pointing up, but the cornice of the building, it becomes the shield in that case. So that light is going up, but it's stopping because it's shielded by the cornice. So in diagram, we should be able to see that through site plan review.
Will you go back to Cameo one more time? Because again, I'm not trying to be too difficult here, guys. I do like the idea of this, but what I'm hearing you saying is we can get a tech spec that's going to tell us how, the distance from that light to the top overhang, how far that light's going to be out. There, I would argue, like, if this were going before us after this was passed, somebody could make the argument that that light actually probably does escape just beyond that in certain edges, right? If we looked at the radius of the light at that distance above the light, part of it might escape. I'm just concerned, I don't want to get into where we're denying things like this.
Right. I put this in there because I think it's a great example. It's a shielded fixture, so it's not just an open bulb, which it would be projecting light straight into the viewer's eyes, right? It's directing it up, and the cornice is over the edge further than the structure itself. So I would expect this in diagram to look something like the fixture's this deep, the cornice is this deep. That clearly shows that the cornice is overlapping the fixture.
So you're saying
Therefore, the
it's
light is pointing up and shielded by the cornice of the building. And if this building had no cornice, that light would be projecting in the night sky. We would direct them to pick a fixture that would point light towards the building and not directly up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. I don't know exactly what I would change in the wording to make it more feel better for me here, but I think I'm still in support of it as it is.
Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Does the state have any regulations concerning lighting? And if so, how does this compare with what the state recommends?
To my knowledge, there's not like dark sky friendly or shielded lighting that would be all subject to local control and zoning ordinances. There may be state on nuisance lighting. Are you aware?
There are some federal regulations. If you live near an airport, you can't have lights that might confuse traffic. And I believe there's also regulations if you are near a port and you can't have a red or a green light that might be confused for an aid to navigation.
To the extent.
So no controls.
But
Okay.
Any additional comments?
It says to the extent practical.
Yeah. Ms. Castillo, any additional comments? Would you
Pardon,
like
yes,
to
sorry.
share?
Blame him. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I had a question. Really, it was back when Mr. Zuloff was talking. I just wanted to clarify with Ms. Blair, the 3,000 K or lower addresses that excessive lighting issue that he was pointing out, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I had one more question, but I lost my spot. Doo-doo-doo. And the shield also helps with the light trespass, correct? And what you were saying with regard to people wanting to light up trees and stuff, couldn't they still do that shield, but maybe so it would be facing forward instead of upward? Because we noticed the language said to the extent that's practicable. Am I saying that? Practicable. That sounds very weird to say, but anywho, I digress. So that means that could still be an option with regard, with the way the language is written currently. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? I guess my only comment would be, this is a forward-looking, this would be forward-looking, so I guess any time you're making changes, you're always, or chances are you're going to get challenged somewhere down the road. And the other thing was, when we had talked yesterday, the enforcement aspect will be, I would imagine, will be somewhat difficult as we move along, but it is what it is when you make these changes, so.
Yeah, and again, the changes are only prospective.
Yes.
They do not apply to any existing structure.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, just
Mr. McGorry.
quick observation, just sitting here listening to everybody's thoughts on this, and I guess it would be grandfathered, but in the front of my yard, we actually have, and my neighbor has two of them, what were Midway, cast iron Midway lights from the Cedar Point Midway from like the turn of the century. Then they're a globe. And so it's a round globe, and I guess that's a bad light. Now we happen to, and I ended up buying a frosted globe and put a low watt bulb in it, and it lights it all the way around, but it really doesn't let it out. But I guess where I'm going with that is some people might like that type of a glow versus looking at the star. Other people, so it's really beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And what we're talking about is more legislation. I'm not saying it's bad or wrong. I'm just saying that these are the kinds of things that people argue about, people complain about, and what somebody likes, somebody else doesn't like, and whether you light a flagpole. I mean, in the old days, they didn't have lights on flagpoles. There was what was called retreat. You lowered the flag at sunset. So I don't know what the right or wrong of it is, but we're ending up telling people what they can do and what they can't do, and somebody's not going to like it. And quite honestly, and I don't know if it was Mr. Zuloff or some Mr. Whalen, I think some of it may not really be that bad, but it might be in violation. And I don't know, I just have a hard time where you draw the line on all this stuff. So I don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zuloff.
I haven't had a chance to
We'll call
review.
for the vote.
I haven't had a chance to review, but how did this address luminous intensity again, this legislation? Because I really didn't have a chance to really review it, and I was kind of hoping that there'd be some time to consider some of the comments rather than have one discussion on it before we send it along. Did I hear that we're being asked to recommend for this as is, or will there be a chance to maybe let some of the comments sink in and see what we can do to adjust for those?
Ms. Blair?
Thank you. I would defer to the commission if you think it's sufficient as written to recommend to city commission, or if you would like to see changes brought forward. On the question of illumination intensity, we have from my understanding, based on the research that we did, measuring the intensity of light is done with instruments that measure like foot candles, like how bright something is. They're difficult and not always precise. We've spoken with some sign producers because we've gone into illumination conversations with Landmarks Commission on a number of cases where the intensity of light is really experienced by how close you are to it and the context. So at sunset, it's going to feel different than at midnight, sort of thing, of like how bright your eyes experience a light, and the color temperature is intended to address that. So without a harsh, bright blue-white like this, you'll be able to experience the light, exterior light fixtures at a 3000 K color temperature or warmer, and you won't experience that as overly bright. And so without the capability of actually measuring illumination, that serves multiple purposes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
This is exactly the kind of thing I'm worried about. Luminous intensity is considering it's inescapable. I don't see how you can not quantify the luminous intensity without running into trouble of calling it arbitrary. How do you determine? It's not that hard to measure. The instruments are fairly cheap, doesn't take a lot of training. I'm not saying you'd have to run out there and measure every time, but I believe you're going to need some kind of quantifiable standard, or you might as well not have it. I might be wrong about that, but this is the exact thing I think that needs to be deliberated. I have a pretty decent grounding in physics, and I'm telling you, the range of luminous intensity is huge, and putting a little light bulb, in a frosted fixture is trivial and not going to create a problem at all, and not going to materially attribute. But if you put too much in there, it's going to be a mess. And you can't look at it and measure it. You can't have somebody deciding, I don't like it, or it's bright to me, or it glares because I've got cataracts. You're going to have to measure, quantify these things in both. By the way, color temperature is not a very clear standard. So that's going to come up, because color temperature could have a bunch of spikes of various frequencies, or it could be essentially a white light in that it has a bell curve range of colors. So all these things will come up, and color temperature is a gross oversimplification, although it's a usable standard.
And that was my comment directed at enforcement, that I think enforcement will be tricky. I mean, what do? Do you send out the lighting police and you have some sort of handheld instrument? We talked about that yesterday also. So that's a concern. But I think sometimes it all comes down to, usually my experience in government, and forgive me for going off on a rant, but my experience in government is there's usually plenty of legislation on the books. The issue becomes as Rick Perry used to say, boots on the ground, right? The enforcement piece is the most important piece, and that's where we always fall short. And it would be the same in this situation. I go back to when we passed legislation for the boom boxes and things in cars. Well, I still hear them all over town. But the intent was good. So I think we're talking about the intent. Will we follow up with the enforcement? I don't know. But does that stop us from approving this tonight, or do we want more time to kind of mull it over and maybe come back at the next meeting and give Ms. Blair some suggestions if we have any?
Mr. Chair, through you.
Mr. Whalen.
I'm hearing a lot of things that maybe we could sharpen up this language a bit. Again, I don't think it's been, I think for the last 5 years, we have not approved a new building that didn't have lights that meet this criteria. So it's not something that in the next 2 months or next month.
At site plan?
Yeah, every site, every plan that we've approved, I'm pretty sure we've had this stipulation on it, correct?
I wouldn't say everybody, but when we do parking lots and so forth, we have had that. It has not been complied with, though.
To me, it makes more sense to take an extra, table it today. I would make a motion to table this for today.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
I'm okay with
Mr. Chairman, if it's our intent
Mr. Zulaw?
to suspend debate to a specific time, namely the next meeting, then I'm in favor of that. I think that's the intent, right? Not to table it and forget about it
Yeah, no,
forever.
I think we're generally in favor of this, and we've
Yes.
talked about it for years, and we want to do
So your
this, but
intent
let's
is
get
to
it right.
talk,
Let's get it
you'd
right.
like to talk about it at the next meeting?
My request would be that if we have comments, we get them to Ms. Blair in plenty of time before the next meeting, at least a week before the next meeting. Is that enough time?
How about a week from
To
now?
incorporate something, or a week from now? But I do recall there was a plan. What plan was that where we asked for comments and we ended up extending because nobody ever gave the comments, but then when we got to the table, they wanted more time. So I would hope that we would follow up with the comments before the next meeting in plenty of time for her to incorporate.
Yep.
Mr.
I
McCoy.
have a question for staff. If the city were to do nothing to enact new guidelines and just rely on logic and consideration and cooperation with new projects going forward, all of which have to be approved, plus we have nuisance laws on the books too. If somebody's shining a spotlight in your window, that could be addressed, even, I think, under current law. So my question is, if you didn't enact anything, could you just use recommendations such as downlighting and things like that for every project going forward? Do you actually need an absolute standard? That's my question.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zulaw, do you want to answer his question, Ms. Blair? And then
Ms.
we'll go to
Blair, I
Mr.
can
Miller and
answer
Mr.
that if you'd like. So currently, we can recommend the dark sky friendly fixtures. The issue is we don't have a definition in our code that defines what that is, so we don't have any enforcement mechanism as of right now. We can just ask for it and hope they comply without any current legislation.
well,
Mr. Miller.
thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. My comment is that I sense the consensus developing around tabling, and personally, I would be a little disappointed, the old maxim about perfect being the enemy of good. We've waited so long to make a step forward that any change, as has been pointed out, there's going to be some resistance, and I don't think any change is final forever, like, we won't do anything until we can do it perfect idea doesn't get us closer to where we need to be. We enact this, and there's problems, we tweak it. That's my thought about it, and I'd be fine to put this to bed and wait for problems to arise that we can address. But that's just me.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Zulaw. And then-
Yeah, I feel it's urgent to point out that, no, we can't address it with current legislation. There's all kinds of lighting that requires no approval from the city at all, right? So no, we need the lighting ordinance. We don't have the tools, and if I can't see how we even come close to having the tools to have a reasonable behavior when it comes to ensure reasonable behavior when it comes to lighting. I welcome comments, though. I sense that maybe the law director could expand on that a little bit or shed some light on that question.
Mr. Hastings, do you have anything?
Hopefully, not too much light, but,
Not too much.
yeah, no, I'll offer light, not too much. Yeah, it's a complicated issue. There is no current nuisance law on lighting. It's something that we have proposed, not before this commission, but something that we're hoping the other commission takes up. Light is very much like sound. Those who are physicists know that they follow the inverse square rule. And so it is very difficult to have an objective standard that says X number of decibels is too loud and X number of lumens are too loud or too bright, when it all depends on how far you are away from it. Light dissipates very quickly, so does sound. Lots of communities have very difficult issues enforcing sound ordinances, noise ordinances. Whether it's motorcycle pipes or things like that. And so that many of them gravitate to things like, well, you can't have altered mufflers. You can't have, you must have manufacturer mufflers and stuff like that. So it is a complicated area. This is a step, and I know the staff has worked very hard on it. And it does give them tools for new projects to insist upon lights that help protect the dark sky.
Mr. Chairman, could I follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
Could I follow up on that?
I'm going to go to Mr. Jackson, Mr. Zerwa.
Okay.
So I think the problem isn't how bright the light is, but where the light goes. And this ordinance here is going to try to address the problem on where the light goes when it's illuminated.
Is that a motion to move this along to the
Hold on,
city
through you, Mr. Chairman, I just have one
Yes,
more.
Ms. Castillo.
So I've already stated that I like this. I think it's going to be good. I think it's important. It did spark my concern, or I guess curiosity, with regard to the luminous intensity. And I know you said that there's certain tools and things. I wondered if you thought it would even be possible or within the scope of what the city could do to even set a quantifiable standard for that luminous intensity. And then the other thing is, if we did even have a standard, we just talked about how we're already struggling with enforcement. Is it even practical, realistic so we table it or we put it off just to learn more information or to change the language and include something about that? Is it even worth it if we were to do that, and is it possible? I guess is my question.
Thank you for that question. Our intention was to bring forward something simple and enforceable to the extent that we can, which is to ask site plan applicants to show us the design of their fixtures and to be able to hold them to the temperature of the light, which is shown on a manufacturer's document of the bulb. And that measuring light intensity, how bright it is out of the possibility of what we have capability to do right now, and that the nuisance ordinance that we would bring at the same time to City Commission would address that by specifically calling out light as a nuisance and glare, that when it is a problem, we have a mechanism to enforce that through the police department.
Okay. And
So that no
they'll have
one's out there
some tool by
measuring
that time
light
that would
brightness.
measure, and they would be able to, because I also worry about a standard. If we don't have the tool to do it, is somebody just eyeballing it, like, that looks too bright, that looks okay, trying to be uniform here, because Mr. McGorry pointed out, sorry, I blanked out there, different people have different opinions and what they like, and so if we tell one person that light works and then tell somebody else it doesn't, and then they're like, oh, why did they get approved and I didn't, or whatever. So I just wondered if it would even be worth doing all that and if we can't enforce it and such, so.
I've got a question. How many complaints of this nature with the dark sky lighting and those issues have we gotten over the last year?
It's a good question.
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall any specific complaints to me. Now, if the code compliance had some, then I can't answer for them. The only complaint I've had was for one really specific, unique case, and it was a residential case. It turned into more of a civil case than into something the city was involved with, but I have not received any complaints.
So for a year, we have not received any complaints.
Well, through the chair,
And with all due respect to Mr. Miller, if we waited a month and tried to get it right or try to tune this up or whatever we want to do, certainly if we haven't had any complaints in a year, we could maybe wait a month to make it right or to try to get it right. It's never going to be 100% right, as we've pointed out, and maybe move in that direction. But I just throw that out there to see what the table thinks. Mr. McGorry.
Just to try to answer your question, I can think of one, maybe 2 years ago now, when the Sports Force Park first lit up their playing fields out there. Those lights, first off, they had to leave them on for some reason for like 3 days straight, something about the bulbs. At least that's what I was told.
Yes.
I live across the Back Bay over at Cedar Point, and when those first went on and stayed on all night long, I could read a newspaper in my back room from the lights that were across the bay.
True.
In the middle of the night. Now, they started moving lights around and shined them down onto the fields, but that is still very, very bright. And I don't know how that would be it would be grandfathered at this point, but that's a big project, and I don't know how those kinds of things would be impacted or affected. Or Strobel Field.
And Mochi.
Yeah.
Mochi
Right,
over here. But
exactly.
if you don't leave the lights on, if they go off at a certain time, is that within the realm of being reasonable? And in that situation, yeah, I heard about that. Mr. Zier was. But they had to test those lights, was my understanding. They had to leave them on for 24 hours for a couple of days to test them. So I think we've had ample debate. Where are we going with this?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zula.
just briefly, number one, our sound ordinance, I'd like to point out that it's very specific about quantifiable at the edge of the owner's property. In other words, it's a violation if and in my opinion, a trespass if it's too loud at the edge of your property. So it wasn't, our sound ordinance wasn't that complicated. We just lacked the will or interest to enforce it. I believe we went years without ignoring the ordinance. I don't think we even appointed a sound I believe it was a noise ordinance officer we were supposed to have, and equipment. And we had the equipment, and then they decided it was obsolete, and we didn't have anybody trained in how to use it. And we really didn't have the will. I don't think this community is really terribly interested in nitpicky stuff. There's little danger that this is going to be over-enforced. The real danger is that it's going to be ignored or under-enforced. Regarding the, yes, so I'm glad someone brought up Sports Force and Moochie, because no, they weren't within our community, but they were egregious violations. Moochie Farms altered the way they did business just to overcome.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I would like to move on with this.
Well, you gave yourself 2 comments in between.
Well, I gave you plenty of comments. By the way, I think there's an issue.
Is that a motion to suspend debate?
I'm talking, Mr. Zuloff. I think there's an issue if you pass legislation and you don't enforce it. To me, that's being overzealous. Why would you pass legislation with the intent that you're not going to enforce it?
So you just gave me the floor and then gavelled me down because you wanted to say something.
I wanted to respond. Anybody else have anything else to say?
Here's what we need to do. Okay, we either just decide that we're going to pass this or not. And the only way to do that is to take a vote to see who's for it and who's against.
I agree, but
Is that a motion?
Motion and
I
a
make-
second.
through you, Mr. Chairman, I want to say one more comment, please.
There's a motion.
I'm making a motion.
There is a motion and a second, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question, not a debate.
Last question.
I just
last
wonder exactly what all are we looking to find more information about that we want to put it off? Because I hear a lot of different things. I just would like a consolidated list of what it is you all would like to see to be able to move forward, since I do hear that most everybody up here it sounds like everybody's in support of some kind of legislation with regard to the dark sky, but we're worried about enforcement and some other things. I would like to maybe have a consolidated list if we are going to put it off, so that we know, what we're even expecting here.
Ms. Ramble, before somebody answers that, what is the motion on the floor? I've lost.
To table until the next meeting. And it wasn't part of the motion, but you guys talked about setting a date of when comments had to be in, so it could be addressed for the next
So
meeting.
maybe we could put those details in the comments or however it goes. But
Who made that motion?
Connor Whalen, and seconded by Pete McGorry.
yeah, let's vote.
Okay, let's vote.
Okay. David Miller.
On that motion?
Yes.
This is to table it, correct?
Motion to table.
Motion to table, no.
Mike Zuloff.
Yes.
Jay Castile.
No.
Jim Jackson.
No.
Connor Whalen.
Yes.
Steve Pajali.
Yes.
Pete McGorry.
Yes.
4-3.
I counted 4 yeses to table.
Motion passes.
Motion passes 4-3.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Ms. Castile seemed to want a list for Ms. Blair as far as the items that we'd like to see discussed. Like, what are the items that we want to see?
I do, I don't-
Do we want to try and maybe give that? I'm only thinking there's 2 things.
Point of order, we've
Yeah, we approved the motion to table. I guess
could talk
So I guess in the meantime, I'd like to know what I'm looking for, what I'm researching, so when we come back, we can say, okay, this is taken care of, this is not. What did we find out? What did we research?
Point of order,
I like
the appropriate
action-based
action would be to
solutions. I don't want to keep pointing
direct
out
that to the
problems.
staff during the week. Because
Yeah,
we've got,
that's what I was thinking.
That's fine. I don't want to do it today. I just want to make sure that's done because
Ms. Blair,
keep pointing out the
can you
problem
get
with
with
no
Ms.
solution.
Castillo? And
Yes, direction on this specific as possible within the next 2 weeks would be very helpful.
Okay.
We'll have to vet anything through the law department before we bring anything back to you, and we need time to prepare our staff reports.
All right, thank you.
I have to leave.
And
to pick up my children.
before we adjourn, I just want to point out the article in Monday's paper with Ms. Castillo, our new author. I just
Oh,
want
yes,
to point
thank
that
you
out.
so
And,
much.
you know, I was impressed with your resume. Morgan Stanley and degree in public administration from
my-
the Ohio State
Yeah,
University.
the Ohio State, it's actually in political science pre-law, because I'm going to go to law school too,
That's even better, yeah.
when I'm done being an author.
We'll look for their signed copies next meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Bring your copy and I'll sign it.
All right. Okay, I guess we'll stand adjourned then.
Do we need a,
And Mr. Hastings, I was told by another barrister that you don't need a motion to adjourn?
Language.
You should
Or a
have a motion
second?
to
Or a
adjourn.
second? You don't need a second, you just make the motion to adjourn?
Just make a motion, and the chair can do it by acclamation.
Okay, thank you.
we
stand adjourned.
You get a lot of that.
I acclaim.
Article about Austin.
Get a lot of that. It always bugs me that.
And they're
on a
blue
second they
arches?
wanna vote on it.
No, they
What you do is say,
ordinance
so
where parking
But I don't care about
requirements